think I thought about what I want to say, but I'm not quite sure how it's all going to come out. There's another way of saying what you already know is I'm a storyteller. And the major thing to know about storytellers is we have a very light regard for the truth. And at the end of the day, what you have to do is run it all through your own experience, and if you happen to run into something that resonates, that might be useful. But most of all, what I would hope is to be able to make you uncomfortable enough to think of questions that you knew about but hadn't really jumped in on, knowing that over the next few days exactly the right people are here to share those questions and perhaps understand that getting the answer actually is sort of not quite what it's at. Being in the middle of that question can be inordinately exciting, just a personal experience. So, if I have any hope for whatever it is I have to say, it's to not tell you everything about open space or anything else, but to sharply pose some questions that have been meaningful for me, and maybe hope that they will be sufficiently opening, just parenthetically or not even parenthetically, major point. For whatever reason, we always seem to be a country and a society of answers. If you don't have the answers, you ain't got nothing. To the point that we always forget, or we very often forget, what the questions were to begin with. We have an education system that pumps out answers and never deals with the question. And if you think about the word question, it begins with the word quest. It's a journey. It's really all about opening space to allow new meanings to emerge. And it may just be that sitting easily in that opening could be the most fulfilling thing you'll know for a long time. Or something. Anyhow, in case you hadn't noticed, it's getting a little exciting out there. This fall, I was in Serbia for open space on open space, and they asked me if I'd say something. I said, well, you know, it's kind of interesting sitting here just a little bit west of the Ukraine, not very far north of the Middle East, and pretty quick journey down to the west coast of Africa and everything that's going on there with Ebola. And you know what? It focuses the mind. Yeah. I have to say, the present moment is certainly as exciting and wonderful as any I've ever seen. And, as in any good moment like this, it's terrifying also, if you got any sense. It perhaps brings us to an understanding that we really are riding on a knife edge. We always do. Sometimes we persuade ourselves that it's actually a lot more secure than actually it is. I love that people say, well, you know, we could destroy the planet. Well, that's always been true. I mean, think about it. Any handy asteroid could get rid of us instantaneously. So ending it all is not a new thought. But it's very clear that the transformative forces cut loose in the world by things like internet and everything else are now racing at a speed that I certainly have never seen before. Now, I'm not sure it's faster. It may just be that we know more about it more quickly. But the net effect is it's moving. And under those circumstances, whether you perceive that motion from an office an organization or working around the world doing whatever. Under these circumstances, the business of high performance and peace become more than academic, I think. High performance in the sense that we actually maximize the human resources that we've got so that we can deal with the issues that are in front of us. You know, it's not just a nice thing, it's not that it produces money, it does all that too. But how about having enough energy to cope with the rapid complexity of our everyday existence? To do things perhaps in a smarter way so that we don't wake up in the morning and say, I'm so goddamn tired I can't do another thing. Or listen to our cellmate in the local office complain about how awful things are. I mean, isn't that terrible? Work has become a dungeon for some people. Anyhow. So high performance would be really nice, and peace. I mean, we could certainly use a bit of it. Not just in odd places like the Middle East, but how about in the local school system or down the block? For whatever it's worth, I find, I'm not sure this is right, but it's the way I've been thinking about it. When you say peace, high performance, we know pretty well what that is. I mean, that's getting it on and doing it well. And when we run into it, we know what it is. So we don't have to worry about defining it. Peace is something else. I think an awful lot of people think when you say peace, they think, okay, well, the absence of war. Well, maybe. But in a curious kind of way, if you ever read the Bhagavad Gita, in the midst of this battle, the hero experiences peace. Sort of. So what would peace mean if it wasn't just the absence of fast motion? I mean, I think a lot of times we think of peace simply as, you know, lying in a hammock and singing Kumbaya and saying, oh, and that can be, but that isn't the sort of peace that's going to get anything done, is it? So anyhow, I rather think that we find peace at those moments when everything flows together in such a way that it seems to be without strain. It may be moving quickly, it may be moving slowly, but it's all sort of flowing together. It's kind of, if you ever watch basketball, it's when Magic Johnson and what's the guy's name from the Celtics would be?
Bird.
What? Bird. Yeah. Out there doing their thing, and massive competition. But it was a dance. It was just one of the most graceful, flowing dances that you can imagine, if you happen to like basketball. So anyhow, peace, high performance, useful for the moment. And one of the really strange things, and I'm just going to say this, and you guys can try and validate it in your own experience, but over 30 years of experience with open space, which I frankly view as an experiment. I mean, a natural experiment. And it sets up very nicely that way. But one of the really odd things is that high performance of a level that most people in the particular moments found unbelievable breaks out, just happens. You don't appreciate it so much in a gathering such as we are, but if you happen to be designing a major building or redesigning an airplane or whatever, and then you just happen to get it all done in 2 days instead of 2 years, it might dawn on you that something significant had happened at the level of performance. One might even call it high performance. And the worst of it was it didn't even feel hard. And at the end of it, people were hugging and kissing. Now, we all know this is illegal, immoral, and fattening, and not to happen at work, because people are having fun. All right. this just seems to happen, and so there's a story to check out. Either in your own personal experience or talk to other folks around and about. But for some reason, to simply sit in a circle, create a bulletin board, open marketplace around an issue that people care about, they will perform at a level of that they will find retrospectively mind-blowing. Equally unsettling is that in massively conflicted situations, I told the story of the Palestinians and Israelis, but over and over and over and over again with all sorts of people in all sorts of places, simply open some space, and that kind of peaceful flow that I was talking about just appears. Now, it's tempting to say, okay, how'd you do that? And the answer, from everything else in our professional experience, we have to have this totally exotic process, and somebody has to be facilitating it very well, and somebody has to be working exceptionally hard, etc. Isn't that the way stuff gets done? And the answer is none of the above. This is not a great secret. You already know it. I believe, and I think this 30-year natural experiment, I won't say it's proved, but you know, when you've done something 300,000 times, 146 countries over 30 years, and more or less the same thing happens every time, I would begin to suggest the data is coming in. And if peace and high performance shows up with some regularity, there might be some connection. It's just an odd possibility. And what would be the mechanism, since you didn't have anything to do with it, that might do that? Obvious answer is self-organization, whatever that is. Well, if that happens to be true, I'm not even going to try and prove it or not prove it, how do we get there from here at a more intentional one? Suzanne put something on the internet which was sent me, which I just love. To perhaps say that, as crazy as I may sound, I'm not alone in my madness. This is by, I assume he might be from Montreal, La Loupe.
Frederick Laloux.
Yes, he might be.
Invented organization.
Yes. I think, oh, he's probably, I'm sure he's writing in English, I think he might be never.
He is French.
He is
from
French.
Belgium.
Oh, from, oh, he's Belgium, okay. Whatever. Reinventing organization, I think, is a massive misnomer for that book, because by definition, nobody invented any of it. But what he says is, and I think this is really neat, he says, but even though we are only now starting to get our heads around it, self-management is not a startling new invention by any means. It is the way life has operated in the world for billions of years, bringing forth creatures and ecosystems so magnificent and complex we can hardly comprehend them. Self-organization is the life force of the world, thriving on the edge of chaos with just enough order to funnel its energy, but not so much as to slow down adaptation and learning. For a long time, we didn't know any better and thought we needed to interfere with life's self-organizing urge and try and control one another. It seems that we are ready now to move beyond rigid structures and let organizations truly come to life. Well, I'm not sure we are actually ready, but I do think we should be. But what would that mean if we were to do that? Now, I think it's pretty clear what it doesn't mean. It means you're not going to design your way to it. You're not going to come out with the next best political system. You're not going to force people to behave in the appropriate and nice way. You're not going to control them in such a fashion that they will get, you know. All of those those things you're not going to do. Why? Now, it's just a story. Because if you did it, it's like being a gardener and pulling the plants up by the roots to see if they're growing. It doesn't work for it. And there's a light to all of this that might be worthwhile thinking about. If there's anything true in what I was just saying, it would be equally true that most, if not all, of what we are currently doing under the heading of management is not only ineffective, but counterproductive. Most, if not all, of what we are currently doing under the heading of management is not only ineffective, but counterproductive. Now, why? Because it might very well be, and I rather suspect that it's true, that humanity shares within colonies the common power of being created by self-organizing principles, system. And the system can do a much better job than we can. Now, I grant you, this is a remedy. So, if any of that's true, what we're involved, one other thing. Doing what we're doing under the heading of management or consulting, frankly, creates major ethical problems for me. I mean, if you're out there selling something that is ineffective and counterproductive, there's a word for that. It's called fraud. Now, those are harsh words. And I don't think anybody is intentionally doing it, but we have a whole system that's called your MBA programs, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera, to say nothing of all us consultants. If you think about it, just a story, but if you think about it, I think most of what certainly I have done, and I expect a lot of us do under the heading of consulting, is to try and prepare people to work more effectively in the current systems. Now, if it should turn out that the current systems are fundamentally flawed, preparing them to do that is quite simply introducing them to nothingness. Think about it. Every single thing that I can think of that consulting interventions that I am familiar with does is to try and straighten out some quirk in the system. People don't communicate, and then it's the whole 9 yards. And the funny thing is, this is my experience, you tested out. Take the same group of people that you have now been hired for a year or two to straighten out. Bring them into an open space environment, and all of a sudden, they don't have any communication problem. They don't have any motivation problem. They don't have any command and control problem. They don't have any problem with lack of performance. They don't have any problem with office fights and things like that. They're flowing. And what did you do? Nothing. All you did was invite them to be what they already were. We've seen that so often that it gets a little hard to overlook it. So, okay, fair enough. Let's assume that some of that might be true. Where do we go from here? I don't know exactly. But I can think of 3 things and play with them, see where it goes. First one is unlearning. The hardest jump, and just use the open space experiment that people have when they first say, okay, I'd like to facilitate that, is to understand there is nothing for you to do. You do not do open space. Open space does you. And it was there before you ever got there, and it's going to be there long after you leave. All you're doing is inviting people to do what they already know how to do. Now that is, talk about paradigm shift. I mean, if put it in slightly more academic terms, standard way of looking at an organization, you know, maybe the organization you did or somebody did, well, whatever. and well, they had to, because if they hadn't made it, it wouldn't have happened.
It wouldn't exist.
Exactly. And so that being the case, they are also, or somebody is now, responsible and in charge, and they're going to run it and all the rest of it. That's the deal. And, oh yes, there is this funny thing, self-organization, which we recognize in the stars and the birds and the bees, but never happened to human beings, because our systems we made, we control, and we run, don't you know? Then there's a funny thing you'll find it referenced in most management books. It's called the informal system. My favorite quote from a guy who wrote a big, thick management textbook. You know, 800 pages of how to organize and command and control and so on. The little note says, the informal system is that system that employees use to get their jobs done. That's it. I just ask you, think of your place of work and your experience with it. Does anything ever happen according to plan? No. Did the book of procedures and rules ever actually reflect the way business got done? No. If you want to find out what's going on in a company, you sure you can read the personnel handbook. Are you going to learn anything? You're going to learn that somebody spent a lot of time on it. But actually what you want to do is go out and talk to Lucy. Who's Lucy? Lucy is some second-level accountant who's been around for 20 years and knows everybody. Okay, and if it happened, could have happened, might have happened, should have happened, will happen, Lucy knows that. Where does Lucy get her authority? Self-organized. My experience, try it. That's the way things happen. All the stuff that we sort of put on it is useless. That's amazing. Addition. Maybe. So the first part is unlearning. And that's paradigm shift. And if we learned anything about paradigms, it's that shifting paradigms, everybody says, okay, well, you just go out and shift your paradigm. That's bullshit. Paradigm is your life. And when you shift it, you die and come back some other way. So saying go out and shift your paradigm, that's kind of like saying go out and commit suicide. Now, I'm putting some pretty heavy words on it, but I mean, I understand. It's a major shift. Why is open space so threatening? I mean, it is. Well, because you're looking at a shifting paradigm. And you're not just looking at it with somebody like me trying to say, okay, this is what you ought to look at. You're experiencing it. And you're in the middle of something that you know damn well can't happen. And it is. And that, incidentally, is the only way paradigms can shift. When suddenly you find your experience and your frame of reference so radically at odds that you finally have to give it up and go with your experience. And as long as you can maintain the fiction, that things are as they've always been in your mind, you'll do that. It's the emperor's clothes suit. But unlearning and switching. Then the next thing I think is seriously appreciate. In my own life and with friends, you know, the first thing that people do when they get a system is they want to fix it. You know, they don't even know what the system is. They want to fix it. There's something about simply sitting in the moment of whatever system you're involved with and allowing it to speak to you. There is a wisdom in that system, I don't care what it is, that so vastly exceeds your own that any thought of fixing it is idiocy. My feeling. So, a deep appreciation, you know, it's the old main story, don't fix it if it ain't broke. Well, we're out there fixing a whole mess of stuff that is broke because we broke it. And if we simply stop doing what we're doing, shouldn't have any problem. Now, here's a point for you. And then the last thing, way down at the end somewhere, is what I would call subtle support. I think at a point where we've done the mind shift, so instead of looking at our work systems designed, we now see that they were self-organized. I mean, the world shifts up that way. It's not that we don't have anything to do. We can do a lot of things. I have computer friends who say, you're saying that the system I designed is self-organizing? And I'm saying, yeah. It wasn't self-organizing when you coded it in, but the first time the user showed up, it's self-organizing. And that's the way it'll be. No exceptions, bar none. But if that is really what the world is looking for, and our first step is to stop doing, our next step is to appreciate what it's doing. I think another step is then to ask ourselves, how can we subtly support what's going on in such a way that it works out. To the extent that there is a process in open space technology, it's the minimal level of support that we have found to be necessary or effective to enable groups of people as large as 3,000 or 4,000 to simply do what they know how to do anyhow, which is self-organize. But it goes a little easier if they start out by sitting in a circle. That's a very private thing. It goes a little easier if there's some paper that they write some stuff down. It goes a little easier if you kind of open a marketplace and let it, you know, the old way we used to get the facilitator to group the issues and assign the topics, right? That was their job. Because, of course, stupid people couldn't do that. Well, I knew everybody was stupid. Okay. But what's the minimal level? Now, for me, open space technology is most useful as kind of a laboratory, as a natural experiment. It's someplace that we can go and try out in a couple of days with real live people on serious issues what it would be like to enliven and support effective self-organizing systems. It also works out as a nice thing you can do with a business or something like that. I mean, it's not bad. I think it's great. But to me, the most powerful part of it is it gives us the opportunity to consciously look at and think about and learn how to work with and support a self-organizing system. And I think the hardest part, certainly for me, is thinking of all the things not. And from the very beginning, if I had a design principle, it was think of one more thing not to do. first time we did it, I've just been, just speaking for myself, peeling stuff away. And just so you get the flavor of it, not quit. First thing that went were warm-up exercise. Everybody knew that you couldn't get a bunch of folks working together unless you did warm-up exercise. And it always seemed to me stupid. I mean, these were silly child games. And you had adults, I don't know, this was demeaning. But in any event, you had to do it. So I didn't do it. So guess what? It was a lot better. We didn't waste any time. Everybody has to wear a name tag. Well, if you really want to wear a name tag and forget who you are, I guess that's a good idea. Do they actually do any good? No. Everybody has to identify themselves as they go around a circle. That's nice. But if you're like me, by the time I'm 3 persons down, I've forgotten who was 2 persons up. How do I get to know people? I get to know people when we share a passion. You know, when you actually engage around something that you both care about, and there's a conversation, then I can probably remember who you were. Before that, anyway. So it was throwing stuff out. How little can you do? Right. Now, that's just an open space. But that's also our everyday business and companies, and school systems. Somebody in here, there she is, works in the school system. Just a totally heretical idea. And you can see a really great video on it from Sugata Mishra. You know Sugata? That's a long story. He's an Indian educational technologist. But in any event, you can get him on YouTube and it's worthwhile watching. But he comes at the end of doing a whole mess of experiments. He comes to this, I think, remarkable conclusion. He says, education is a self-organizing phenomenon. And learning is emergent. And the way he got to that was watching street kids in India teach themselves how to run the internet with absolutely no instruction and solving complex problems. All right. You think what we do to kids in the classroom? Real learning is questing in a nutrient space in which you can begin to sift the question and find answers. And kids learn at the speed of light when they ask the question, when they care. What we keep doing is force-feeding them and trying to control what they learn. And the net result is a whole mess of rote learning. And what do you do when you don't care about something? You memorize it. How long do you have? 3 weeks. Or a week.
When's the test?
When's the test, right? All right, so I think we got a lot to talk about. Beginning with, how do we stop doing what we're doing? Going on to how do we appreciate what's actually happening? Continuing to, how would we support what is that? How do we be good gardeners? Put an image on. How can we be good gardeners? Just make sure the nutrients are around and then get out of the way. Plants will grow all by themselves. Anyhow, guys, I'm looking forward for the next